listening to Closer Look.
You may have heard, we need to let you go. Turns your life upside down, especially if you worked somewhere that you really loved. Or maybe you're just bored right now and don't make enough money, or maybe you want to try something new. I'm Bob Dittman, and this is Closer Look. With us is Dave Sparkman of Crossroads Career Services. Dave, it's emotional to be let go from a job, and looking for a new one can be pretty stressful, can't it?
Absolutely. One of the things we highly recommend, Bob, is that people don't go through this alone. Like many life changes, a crisis in your career or a sudden job loss is not something that is a pleasant experience. And all sorts of emotions come out through that. That's natural. We're human beings. We're going to have ups and downs. And so we ask people certainly not to shy away from it. We, of course, aren't usually looking to embrace fear, but to just recognize that that is something that will come through.
Asking why to God isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, Job questioned God, right?
Absolutely. David, throughout the Psalms, right? We see him questioning God on multiple fronts. And particularly if you feel that you've been unfairly treated in your prior employment, to have some anger, some bitterness, some regrets, perhaps, is a very natural thing. But we like to try to coach people to then recognize that and then turn to Scripture to channel that into a positive approach as to maybe a truly curious question. I wonder what God's up to here. I wonder what's going on as to what he has for me next in the next chapter of my life. And that's where we try to keep people pointing forward. I found throughout my career that if you're looking through the front windshield, it's a lot better than looking in the rearview mirror. You've got to keep looking forward, and having some help along that is what we're here at Crossroads Career trying to do.
Do people who have lost jobs normally continue to hunt for new employment in the same industry?
Yes, very natural to say, well, this is what I was able to make a living doing before, and therefore I should just immediately shift and look for a new job in the same industry. Very normal. However, I believe you're not taking full advantage of the crisis that has now come into your life. What we try to do at Crossroads Career is to work with you to take a step back and look upward to see what is God up to, look inward to see, okay, what have I been shown about myself that I can learn, and then look outward to say, where could I fit in the marketplace, perhaps in a better way than where I was before. A lot of us, you kind of get on the hamster wheel of employment after college and you start to get a lifestyle developed with your finances, and then you just keep doing the same thing. And at times I found an interruption is many times the best thing that could end up happening to a person, to actually give yourself the gift of time and taking some deep breaths to say, why am I here? Where is my identity? Which we believe is hopefully in Christ Jesus, that you can then do Ephesians 2:10, which is doing the works that he prepared in advance for us to do. So that's what we're trying to do, is use this interruption, although it may be a rude one, to look for a longer term, greater good out of that experience.
So I'm assuming that's kind of the first step.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, let's talk about the effects of COVID. About half of Americans who lost their jobs during the crisis didn't get to go back. That's not all bad. I looked up some stats that show many workers found new jobs or even better pay with higher levels than their previous employment. So some sectors of the labor market have had incredible resilience. That does mean there's reason to hope.
As with anything that happens bad in their lives, there is a silver lining. That may not be easy to see for some folks, particularly if you've spent your entire career, for example, in the hospitality industry. And with COVID-19, a lot of the hospitality industry has been very hard hit. But inevitably, you've got transferable skills. Inevitably, you have giftings and experiences that can contribute in a different way in a different industry. Part of the challenge is you may have been in that industry so long that you're not even aware of what you've developed and the skills and gifts that you do have. And again, that's what we're trying to help you uncover, so you can go out into the marketplace with full recognition of what you've been prepared to do.
Our guest on Closer Look is Dave Sparkman of Crossroads Career Services, and I'm Bob Dittman. What kinds of bridges do you need for crossing from one career to another? You talked a little bit about desire, passion, maybe a different source of income. Are those some things that people need to think about?
We've seen recently, even before COVID-19, the rise of a gig economy, how many people were losing faith in corporations with loyalty. And so they started to look at their own skill set and saying, I don't want to rely on just one company to fulfill my income. And as we all know, America has been built through small business. And so small business after small business has been starting, and COVID-19 has been no exception to, with that crisis coming into our lives, how many new small businesses have been started through the desperation. Never underestimate the power of desperation to create and innovate new things. So I think many times people usually shortchange themselves, Bob. I've found when they do their own assessment, they don't think of themselves as either worthy or skilled enough to do certain things. And the reality is their experiences, the giftings that they have, their own capabilities to learn new things are tremendously deep wells for most people. And we try to help them pull back the covers on those wells and start to look inside and say, boy, there are many transferable skills that you can apply in a different area. And in some cases, it may be remarkably different. I encountered a woman at one point in one of our Crossroads small groups who was a wildlife biologist, and she had spent 18 years out with coyotes and beavers in Wisconsin, looking, trying to keep tabs on them. And she wanted to go work in an office. She literally wanted to be in a cubicle. I showed her Dilbert cartoons that did not deter her. That's what she wanted. She wanted a complete about face in what she did. And as we explored those areas, we were able to see transferable skills of discipline, organization, planning, all of which could easily transfer. So transferable skills don't necessarily need to mean, well, I don't know, I type over here and I have to weld over there. It doesn't have to be that different. There are many subtle skills that you've developed over your job life that are very easily transferred into another area.
Thinking about changing careers, do you really have to start at the bottom? Is it worth it to do that?
Again, it might be. There may be stepping stones to get across the pond to the longer term goal that you simply have to make. For example, if you're an elementary school teacher and you've now woken up to the fact that you don't want to teach elementary school, let's say instead of being a school teacher, you wanted to become a nurse or an electrician. Well, you may need to go back and get some fundamental schooling, some education in order to make that happen. You may have to start at the bottom. But again, because of what you have as, I like to call it seasoning of the experience in the workplace, you may be able to move up faster than someone else who doesn't have that experience. So a lot of it is just taking a step back, looking at the overall playing field that you're entering and figuring out what the best way to approach the play would be.
This is Closer Look, and I'm Bob Dittman. With us is Dave Sparkman of Crossroads Career Services, and we're discussing how finding a new job or career can be achieved with the right tools. Now, some people who get laid off have been offered a chance to maybe go to a different part of the organization, though usually a lower level position. Is that a good strategy?
It might be, Bob, depending on where you are personally with your own financial supplies. What you've got as financial resources is always one thing to assess. The other thing that I found is just how much do you dislike or like what you do? There are many studies over many years that have shown the majority of Americans actually don't like what they do every day. They're not fulfilled or content in their current employment. So sometimes being offered a different role, even though a lower pay or a lower salary grade or position might actually put you in a job where the nature of the work is better suited for your skills and abilities. Not a fun question to grapple with, but one that may be, particularly in the area of COVID-19, one that's very worth grappling with.
You look at skills that could transfer over to a different industry, maybe snag a job in something different they may not ever thought about. How do you help people redefine their career goals?
It comes through some conversations and through questions and reflection. One of the exercises I like to do with people is first job, worst job, best job. And if you think about, Bob, for example, in your own life, what the first, worst, and best jobs were, and if we had time today to explore what those were and why you labeled those particular jobs as first, worst, or best, you'd start to see attributes about the type of thing that you gravitate toward. It may be the nature of the work. It may be the environment that you're in. It may be the location. It may be the goals that were accomplished. Well, when you start to uncover what those are and then couple those with how God marvelously created you to be unique with your giftings, your skills, your abilities, your experiences, your passions, your core values, most of which people really haven't spent much time thinking about, you start to get a wonderful cake mix starting to be baked of the ingredients that are able to put together, which is you. And then to start to see how that may develop into just a wonderful outcome that you had never truly envisioned.
I'm German chocolate cake.
Oh, there you go. Oh, with ice cream. Love that.
All right. Is the attitude towards the trades, say plumbing, electrical, construction, auto tech, maybe more of what used to be called traditional work, is that making a comeback?
Absolutely. I've talked to a number of people in the trades industry, and they have so much backlog of work that they cannot keep up. In fact, I've talked to many of them who say they can't find skilled people to hire, which means then they're open to hiring unskilled people to train to do something different. In fact, I spoke to a gentleman who was going through exactly that experience, and he has hired a 24-year-old young man who doesn't have any of the skills in the trades, but because he can't find the skills, he's willing to invest his time to train this young man to, in this case, build houses. And so there's a wonderful opportunity, if that's where your passions and interests lie, to explore something in the trades where you may not have had that potential or thought about it in the past. And just to tag on one more thing on that, Bob, many of us as adults, we've gotten used to doing what we do. And we actually close our minds to the possibilities of what we still have the capability to learn. So what we're trying to do when you have an interruption of being laid off or COVID-19 shuts down your entire industry, let's open up your mind to what you still have the capacity to do in learning new things. And that may be a trade and something that you hadn't ever really thought about before. All of a sudden could be very fulfilling, very rewarding, very worthwhile, very contributing to society, but you just haven't given yourself time or the permission to think about it. We like to refer to job seekers as explorers. When you start in the very definition of exploring, you don't know where that's going to take you. And yes, you need to have a plan. You need to be organized because a job search, it takes some time and takes a lot of discipline and effort. But if you also allow yourself a chance to explore what could be out there for you, we have found that God starts to open up just wonderful doors and windows for you to look through.
Most people don't want to be unemployed, but doesn't there need to be some sort of relentlessness in pursuing new opportunities? I mean, is there a risk of getting complacent or waiting too long?
Absolutely, Bob. And that's another thing we find is a challenge many times with people that suddenly get laid off, or particularly if they've been given some severance, or if unemployment is meeting their needs. It's very easy to become complacent and think that, looking for a job is not that difficult. Well, looking for a job could and should be a full-time job. And it takes all of the organization and discipline that your day job would have taken, except now it's in an area that you usually don't know much about. Many people go into that with fear or anger. And so we need to get through that and look at it with excitement and anticipation, and in getting the help to be aware of what's out there in the marketplace. And that marketplace is changing every day. One of the things I find most often with people is when they become unemployed, the rhythm that they did have in their lives has now left. There was a rhythm of getting up in the morning, preparing breakfast, going to work, going through the workday, coming back. That develops into a rhythm. And all of a sudden, the thing that took the most time out of your day is now suddenly completely gone. So how do you organize yourself? How do you come up with the right to-do list that will keep moving you forward? How do you set reasonable goals for your job search? And what should be the measurement as to the accomplishment of those goals? What we find with Crossroads Career is that engaging in a small group is many times the best way to go after it, because there's other people that are exactly in the same boat as you, and they're discovering things. And so if you're not in the mix, if you're not in moving towards something, then you're not just sitting still, you're actually slipping back. How can we help support you in that movement and flow and help you really be looking in areas that maybe you hadn't considered looking, that can then enable you to have that advantage in the marketplace?
What about LinkedIn or Indeed? How important are those?
Critically important. Both of those are exceptional tools to have knowledge of and make use of. And if you are fully employed, of course, you may not be very aware of those tools. You may, for example, have accepted LinkedIn contacts but never explored the power